concept of non-invented here. The Innovation Playbook, A Revolution in Business Excellence. The book is available in the market. And it says that when an organization picks up a concept which was not defined, developed, or introduced by the employees of the organization, there is inherently a risk of resistance from the employees to adopt that practice. It was not invented. If you look at it from the organizational perspective, you will always say, okay, this thing came from outside. We didn't say it. They don't want to own it. And if you look at it from the industry perspective, from the country perspective, it is manifest so easily. I mean, if you look at the US markets, the Korean cars, the Japanese cars, such a long time before they could capture the entire market in spite of having a superior product. It was not because the product was bad, the delivery was bad. It was a simple perception issue. And while talking about implementation of practices, implementation of processes, perception issues are important. The success of your implementation depends on how well it is used by a group of people. So I would say, if you don't have a practice which has been ingrained, which has been incubated in the company, you run a higher risk of failure with your implementation as compared to something that you have developed in-house. A second argument, and I'm going to talk more about, is it really a best practice? Again, these are not my words. Best practices are stupid. Tom Peters, one of the management gurus, once lightheartedly gave a lecture on this, and it's available again. But my points here are, first of all, a best practice, by the time it goes out of the organization and reaches another organization, probably is no longer a best practice. It might be a great practice. By the time the organization decides to implement it within its company, it might actually be just an okay practice. By the time it is actually on the ground and people are using it, there are better things to do. So why exactly are we focused on the outside world telling us a solution to our problems? There is a built-in obsolescence with adopting a best practice. There is a built-in obsolescence in the terms of whenever you take a best practice into the company, you will eventually have to look at it again and see if it still works. If you have to do that rework in any case, why not put your own minds to the problem and come up with a solution which works well for you? Next year, something new. I think as a consultant here helps us that wherever clients have a problem, we suggest a new model. If you adopt a best practice, eventually you will be falling into the same cycle again. You adopt a best practice, your problem is not being solved. You approach the person who identified that best practice in the first place and he says, no, this practice is no longer relevant. You should now go for something else. Like somebody was talking about yesterday, ITSM doesn't help you. You have to focus on yourself. Best practices of today are the history of tomorrow. And that again ties into the point which I was speaking earlier. Best practices are always talking about doing the right things. At that point of time, you don't know whether that practice will last forever. You're investing a lot of money into it. So the whole idea of getting everything into the company and then not having it in place in the future, I think that's a risk worth considering. I have kept this point for the last. Identification is fraught with vested interests. Honestly, if you come to a consulting outfit, and I hope you never have to do that, for the solution of a problem, the solution that you will get will be biased based on the capabilities of that organization. And I say this in all equanimity, I'm not going to judge anything. Any organization will only give you a solution based on what they can do. It's an honest business reality. If you are looking to the outside world for getting the answers to your problem, you will have a problem of vested interest. You come to Vijay for a problem, he'll probably suggest something to do with ITSM. You come to me for a problem, I'll say Scrum. So whatever. I think there is definitely a risk of not even having the concept of a best practice in the industry. While we spend a lot of time in identifying, evaluating, implementing, training, all those things. And this is a very serious thing. A best practice becomes a shortcut for some people to abdicate their responsibility to take decisions. Just because a change request process says that when a change request is received, you evaluate its impact, you analyze whether it's feasible and you implement it, doesn't mean that you should stop talking to your customer. A best practice is not a shortcut. A best practice should always be complemented with a strong management action, having the managers responsible for making sure that the processes work. While it is often used as a shortcut, we did the right things, we did the right process. Why exactly is it a problem? I don't know. And this is something that you should avoid, we should avoid when we're trying to look at best practices over here. And that is why I say, I don't think it is really a worthwhile exercise to go and hunt for answers to a problem outside the market. Now, comes the point that best practices are important because they bring us at par with the best in the industry. What is at par? Are we in this business to be at par? This is a very interesting point, and I think this came up in an earlier discussion today also. Toyota and GE have been par breakers in their own right. They are here, surviving over a period of time because they have their own way. Now we read about books called the Toyota Way or the GE Experiment. Those are things which were created within that time. The idea that an organization needs to be at par with the rest of the industry, I don't think adds any value. When you are, all of us are in the same boat, when all of us are basically talking about the same practices, where exactly is the differentiation? When you're talking about being at par, you're basically selling yourself as a commodity. And when you're a commodity, you don't name your price, the customer does. I argue again here that best practices make an organization more somnolent, make them complicit, and make sure that they don't really innovate as much as they should. The final point is about the opportunity cost, the innovation. 20 years of global delivery model, which is harped upon at times as being a best practice. 20 years of global delivery model. And yet, the only model our Indian companies follow is that when you have to increase revenue, hire more people. Every services company in India still follows the same model. We still don't have a product on deal, except for very few rare exceptions in the banking. After 20 years, we are still a function of the number of people working on a project for our billing. That is why you see our IT services company becoming gargantuan in size. Compare them with the size of product companies. They are half the size usually and have a greater revenue share. Global delivery model was the best practice, and we never really tried to innovate anything beyond that. None of us ventured into the risky space of product management, product development, and here we are, 20 years. In conclusion, I would just want to say that there are a lot of things that I can still add to this discussion. And I want to conclude with one very favorite point of mine. And I'm surprised why I didn't include it. When you talk about Apple, when you talk about Tata Lab, these were disruptive innovations that help the company become free. Anything in the Indian automobile industry today pretty much has to be connected with the Tata Nano in some way or the other. When you talk about Apple, Apple has done everything which the market said it shouldn't have. And yet you have come up with a series of products that have completely defined innovation for our generation as of now. Series of products after products. When you talk about best practices, they don't help you do these things. They might assist you maybe, but they don't help you. So rather than focusing your attention on adopting that best practice, spending your budget on that, we all have a limited cash available, I think we should all introspect and realize that our organizations are capable of delivering so much more rather than being compromised.
You had something for Ashish?
No, I was asking you to move
Okay.
away because it brings a disturbance.
So before even I start off with the favoring the best practice aspect, a few questions on his arguments, not many, Ashish. So first one, where is about, we were talking about GE and Toyota, and we're saying that they're really not having something, they are like, have their own in-house and all that. But just for your background reference, I come from, the past organization was GE and I worked for 7 years in GE. And GE has taken Six Sigma as a best practice from Toyota. And you will not believe now, more than Toyota, GE uses Six Sigma. And it has been used in-house so much that almost every process activity is done. Over there, every manager is required to be Six Sigma and everybody understands that knowledge, and now due to that, the understanding between the various continents, various countries is seamless, simple. You talk about any problem, we basically drop these charts from the Minitab, it's shared between the team, very easy to understand for the people because they have realized that in the kind of the industry they are and with the widespread businesses they have, these best practices actually have helped them a lot. So that was one. Second point was around is the are really best practices important or not? So if you see the history of various developing countries and all that, we have in turn actually been taking these best practices as everything, just not IT. Take the postal system. The Indian postal system is a replica of UK postal system. Take you go to the municipal corporation office. The way they do their filing of their records is absolutely the replica of the way it is done in the UK government department. You take the financial systems which we are having, the way the financial accounting guys operate and all that. They have so many invoices every month they are getting. But still, if you ask a person, I need an invoice of this particular month of Vijay Jain, this is his GID, he will be able to get you from the storeroom in matter of 10 minutes. How he is able to do it? Because they are following a standard best practice. That this is how you should do things. And then even a simple medical slip which was given to me by them 2 years ago, they are still able to give it to me in 10 minutes. Because they have a clear-cut numbering standard. Take for example the Dabbawalas of Mumbai. Their best practice is discussed even at the Harvard University in UK. Because it's really important and people have realized the benefit of best practice. So that was more from the argument point. If you have anything to suggest, please suggest. Otherwise, I'll start with my point.
I just want to add to the point, last 2 points. First of all, regarding the point about GE, I think you probably have a much better idea about it, like you're not arguing that, obviously. Second point comes about having similar processes across systems, across postal systems, across different systems. If you look at even our constitution, it is very similar to the UK constitution. And it was always a question that we had merged different constitutions together to create our own. It always has issues. The whole idea of having a similar process across the world, across the globe, is something that all of us are still debating. I don't think it is a foregone conclusion just because it's a similar process, it's a better process. Next, you gave us the point about the Dabbawalas. I also admire them. What I had a chance to give opportunity also for them some time, and for you also saw that. They have best practice which is unique to them, which almost has quality standards which are inconsistent, I understand. But it is their practice. They are the ones who got something developed by marking colors on their dabbas and coordinating the schedules with the local trains. It is their practice. I don't see how that practice will be replicated by somebody else. So I would still think that the practice which has been incubated within the company, which has been created within the company, will still hold merit over something that has been borrowed from outside. Dabbawala is a good example, but I will say it's not a replicable example.
This is where the point is coming up. As the word suggests, best practice. So if you take lean again uses kind of similar concept as the Dabbawala. So the point here what we are trying to say is, yeah, Dabbawala is not really the one who is using best practice. They have formed it. But this is where the best practice, if you see in my coming slide, it is basically these experiences of people who are now successful, who have already gone through the failures, who have already seen the trauma of not having processes in place and developed it. And this is where we have discussed for last 2 days and in past sessions, don't reinvent the wheel. We have already heard so many times. So this is where the concept is coming into picture. And that's where my argument is about, is that is why best practice is considered as important. And also I would like to add to this that if best practice is not implemented properly, then can be dangerous. And this is what is the part which basically is making look best practices bad. As in the so there is this one caption in Bible where like this person basically gives he basically gives a lift. So during that time, like here now we are giving lift on bikes, but he gives a lift to that guy on the horse, and that person stabs him in the back and basically takes the gold and he's trying to run away. At that time, the person, the good Samaritan, basically tells him that you've done this, no problem, but please don't talk about this to anybody, because going forward, nobody will give lift or help any poor guy. So this is where the issue is coming into, is that if best practice is not implemented properly, it can lead to disastrous problems, and this I fully agree. And this is where, as good consultant at good service management office, we need to ensure that best practices are implemented in true sense what they provide. Now coming to the quick summary.